made for, right? So the first leadership principle that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed in was service. Service. And as I have stated with my leadership trainings and podcasts, that is what leadership is. Leadership is influence and service. John C. Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. However, I like to add to that, right? It's because once you have influence, what do you do with this influence? You serve. As a leader, you serve. You serve your people, right? You serve the employees. You serve at the best interest of the organization. You serve at the best interest of your ideal customer. And of course, you serve at the obligation of those who are your investors or funders, right? You serve. As a leader, you are out front. Not necessarily saying that you got to be seen all the time, but your presence should always be felt, right? Your presence should always be felt. However, there's an old saying that says, it's not about making your presence known, but your absence felt, right? So as a leader, if no one is recognizing or missing you in your absence, then your presence basically means nothing, right? Because again, as a leader, it's about what is called executive presence, right? People know who the leader is, but if you are a great leader, sometimes people can come to an organization and can't tell who the leader is because the leader has done such a great job at producing other leaders who produce other leaders that serve. So that's his first principle, is that he believed in service. The second principle, leadership principle learned from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is vision. Vision, being able to see that which has not yet come to fruition or come into existence, right? So he was one time speaking at a church, and to his parishioners, he said, mine eyes have seen the glory. Mine eyes have seen the glory. And he says, we as a people will make it to the mountaintop, to the promised land, right? He says, I may not make it there with you, but we will make it. Now, if you look at what has actually happened as it relates to history with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he physically has not made it into this day and time with us. However, he has made it with us in principle and in spirit. So again, it's all about having vision, right? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you cannot fly, you should run. If you can't run, you should walk. If you can't walk, you should crawl. Whatever way it takes for you to get there, get there. See? And that brings me to our third leadership principle learned from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is consistency. Consistency. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was consistent as it relates to or in terms of nonviolence. There was so much violence perpetrated on those people who did the sit-ins. There was so much disrespect that was done to those people that were doing the nonviolent protests and marches. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not retaliate with the like. He did not retaliate with violence. He was consistent with his message of non-violence, right? So those are principles. That's a principle to live by in such a hostile environment, going through the hostile mentality of a people who really did not understand that all he wanted, right, for his people was equality, right? And bigger than equality, he wanted equity, for his people, right? So it wasn't trying to get us to have more than anyone else. It was just equity or equality and equality. So he was consistent with his non-violent approach. And that brings us to the fourth principle that he believed in and had, which was courage. He had to have courage to go out and march, right? In a hostile environment with people that had a hostile mindset and ideology completely against what he and his supporters believed in, right? But he had to have courage to face this. He had to have courage even in the midst of them trying to defame him and go after his personal reputation. He still had to have courage to come before the people, to stand on the principles of leadership, to lead the people, to guide the people through this messy, uncertain, hostile environment. He had to have courage. But that all of the first four that I just mentioned of leadership principles were all driven by the fifth and final leadership principle that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. displayed, and we could duplicate and learn from, which is faith. He had faith. He had faith in his principles. He had faith in his messages. He was a consistent communicator about the principles, right, of service, of vision, of consistency, and of courage. He was a strong communicator.